Long before ink touched parchment, before the borders of empires were drawn in blood, the kingdom of Shuruka rose from the African earth. It was a land of obsidian towers and sacred forests, where the people walked with the discipline of soldiers and the pride of lions. But even the brightest sun casts a shadow. In the underbelly of the kingdom, Azhakar was that shadow. He was a creature of the alleyways, a young man carved from violence. He did not know his parents. He only knew hunger and the cold lesson that the strong take what they desire. Leading a ruthless gang, Azhakar moved through the city like a phantom. To him, Shuruka was not a home. It was a carcass to be scavenged. Until the night he broke into the house of Varen. It was meant to be a simple theft. Azhakar moved through the silent halls of the noble estate, his footsteps making no sound against the polished stone. He reached for a golden chalice, but stopped. Across the room, bathed in moonlight, a young woman sat by the window. She was not sleeping. She was watching the stars. Zalithra. Her name meant one whose beauty brings calm to the heart. Azhakar, who had never hesitated to strike fear into a victim, froze. He held a dagger, but his hand felt heavy. For a moment, the violence in his blood went quiet. He left the house that night with empty hands, haunted not by guards, but by a sense of peace he did not understand. Fate, however, is not satisfied with one meeting. 3 days later, on a dusty road outside the city gates, screams shattered the air. Bandits, men from a rival faction, had cornered a traveler. Azhakar, passing by on his own dark business, recognized the woman. Zalithra. He did not think. He did not calculate the risk. The beast within him roared, but this time it roared for her. Azhakar descended upon the bandits like a storm. Bones snapped and steel clashed. Within moments, 5 men lay in the dust, and Azhakar stood breathing heavily, blood dripping from his knuckles. Zalithra did not run. She looked at the blood on his hands, then up to his eyes. She saw the killer, yes, but she also saw the terrified boy hiding behind the rage. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling but steady. "Because," Azhakar rasped, wiping his blade, "beauty should not be broken." That moment forged a bond stronger than steel. Over the coming moons, they met in secret. Zalithra spoke to him of honor, of duty, of a strength that protects rather than destroys. She touched the scars on his arms and told him they were not marks of shame, but maps of survival. "You have fought the world your whole life, Azhakar," she whispered one evening. "Imagine what would happen if you fought for it." For her, the wolf broke his own teeth. Azhakar disbanded his gang. He walked to the palace gates, laid down his dagger, and picked up a spear. He joined the king's guard. He was the finest warrior Shuruka had ever seen. He moved faster than the wind and struck harder than falling stone. But excellence breeds envy. The other warriors, men of noble birth and soft hands, despised him. They remembered the thug he used to be. When rations went missing, eyes turned to Azhakar. When a patrol was ambushed, whispers snaked through the barracks that Azhakar had sold them out. Once a rat, always a rat. The captain of the guard, a jealous man named Kale, would mutter when Azhakar passed. Azhakar bore the insults in silence. He fought for the kingdom. He fought for the woman who believed in him. Then came the child. A strange sickness had taken a family on the edge of the city, leaving only a 7-year-old girl alive. Wherever the orphan went, misfortune followed. A well dried up where she drank. A goat died when she petted it. Fear, the most dangerous poison of all, infected the city. Which, the people hissed, "Cursed child." The mob demanded blood. The king, an old man who feared the anger of his people more than he loved justice, bowed his head. He signed the death warrant. The execution was set for high noon in the great plaza. The girl, small and trembling, was tied to a post. The crowd jeered, their faces twisted with hate. Azhakar stood in the formation of guards. He looked at the girl. He did not see a witch. He saw a frightened child. He saw himself years ago, alone and helpless against a cruel world. He looked at Kale, the captain who held the torch, grinning. Azhakar made his choice. With a roar that shook the plaza, he broke formation. He tackled Kale, sending the torch spinning into the dirt. With one arm, he slashed the ropes binding the girl. With the other, he shoved back the guards. "Run!" he screamed, scooping the child up. He sprinted toward the sacred forest. Behind him, the confusion turned to fury. "Traitor!" The cry went up. "Kill the witch! Kill the traitor!" The chase was long and brutal. Azhakar was faster, but he was carrying a burden. He reached the edge of the ancient woods, his lungs burning. Thwack! A spear tore through his calf. Azhakar stumbled, falling to one knee. He placed the girl behind a thick root. "Stay down," he gasped. He turned to face his pursuers. Kale and a dozen warriors burst through the trees. "I knew it," Kale sneered, breathless. "I knew you were filth." Azhakar drew his sword, though he could barely stand. "She is innocent, Kale. She is a child. She is a curse, and so are you." Kale signaled. 3 spears flew at once. One struck Azhakar's shoulder, another his stomach. The third pierced his chest. Azhakar collapsed. He watched, helpless, paralyzed by pain, as Kale stepped over his broken body. The captain grabbed the screaming child from behind the root. "No!" Azhakar choked on blood. "Please!" Kale did not hesitate. With a single, cruel motion of his blade, he silenced the girl's cries forever. He dropped her small body onto the forest floor. Then the warriors turned their spears on Azhakar. They did not just kill him, they butchered him. They vented all their jealousy and hatred into his flesh until he was unrecognizable. They left him there, a broken heap of meat and bone, next to the innocent child he had failed to save. They marched away, laughing. Silence fell over the forest. But the earth of Shuruka remembers. The blood of the innocent girl and the blood of the redeemed man mixed in the soil, sinking deep into the ancient roots. That night, a moon the color of fresh blood rose over the kingdom. The wind stopped. The birds went silent. From the shadows of the trees, the ancestors emerged. They were figures of smokeless fire, ancient spirits of judgment. They circled Azhakar's corpse. They felt the intent in his heart, the selflessness of his final act. The ground trembled. The roots of the great trees wrapped around Azhakar's limbs, pulling him down into the spirit realm. His heart had stopped, but his destiny had just begun. In the void between life and death, the universe poured itself into him. Muscles knit back together, harder than iron. Bones healed, infused with cosmic vibration. The man who died was Azhakar the warrior. The being that was about to rise was something else entirely.
Death was not the end. It was merely a doorway. Azhakar opened his eyes in a realm of violet skies and silver grass. Standing before him were the 7 massive, faceless entities composed of starlight and shadow. They were the old gods of Shuruka, beings who breathed life into the first soil. They did not speak with words, they spoke with power. One by one, they touched him. The first touch felt like a mountain placed on his shoulders, strength. The second felt like lightning in his veins, speed. Then came vitality, fear, endurance, and destruction. Finally, the 7th god, a figure of shifting gray mist, placed a hand on Azhakar's forehead. This gift was the heaviest of all. It was the ability to see the threads of destiny and pull them. Fate. As the power settled, the spirits of the ancestors circled him. Their voices were a collective whisper, echoing in his mind. "We return you to the world, Azhakar. But know this, power without justice is a rot that eats the soul. You are the scale, not the sword. Restore the balance." Azhakar gasped, his body jerking awake. He was back in the forest. The mud where he had died was still wet with his own blood, but his skin was flawless. He stood up. The air felt different. The ground felt different. He could feel the heartbeat of a beetle 10 paces away. He could feel the fear of the men who had killed him, miles away in the city. He was no longer just a man. The return to Shuruka was not quiet. When Azhakar walked through the city gates, silence swept across the market like a cold wind. Women dropped their baskets. Guards froze, their hands shaking on their spears. They had seen his corpse. They knew he was dead. "Ghost!" someone screamed. "A demon!" People scrambled over each other to flee. But amidst the chaos, one woman did not run. Zalithra stood in the center of the street, tears streaming down her face. She had felt his death in her soul, and she had refused to accept it. While others saw a monster, she saw the man she loved. She ran to him, burying her face in his chest. He was warm. He was real. "They told me you were gone," she sobbed. Azhakar held her gently, his eyes scanning the terrified crowd. "The man I was is gone," he said softly. "But I have returned to finish what he started." First came the reckoning. Azhakar found Kale and his men celebrating in a tavern. When the door blew open, the laughter died. Azhakar did not draw a weapon. He didn't need one. Kale, drunk and trembling, grabbed a spear. "I killed you! I watched the life leave your eyes." "You watched a man die," Azhakar said, his voice vibrating with the power of the seven. "Now, look at what you have made." With a mere flick of his wrist, the men were thrown against the walls by an unseen force. Azhakar did not kill them quickly. He let them feel the terror the little girl had felt. He let them beg. And when justice was done, the city knew that the wolf had returned as a god. Next, Azhakar marched to the Obsidian Palace. He stood before King Omari, a proud and stubborn ruler. Azhakar's demand was simple. "Issue a decree," Azhakar commanded, his voice echoing off the throne room walls. "No child shall ever again be executed for witchcraft. The practice ends today." The king laughed. He looked at his elite guards, 50 of the finest killers in the land. "You are one man, dead or alive. You do not command a king." "I am not asking." "Seize him," the king roared. 50 spears lunged forward. Azhakar did not move his feet. He simply raised a hand. "Stop." Instantly, the soldiers froze. Not out of fear, but physically. Their muscles locked. They became living statues, trapped in mid-stride. The room fell deathly silent. The king stood alone on his dais, his crown suddenly feeling very heavy. "I give you 7 days," Azhakar said, turning his back on the terrified monarch. "Change the law, or I will change your fate." The king, blinded by pride, refused. He sent assassins. Azhakar brushed them aside like flies. He sent armies. Azhakar walked through them untouched. When the 7th day passed, Azhakar did not storm the palace. He did not burn the city. He simply reached into the invisible threads of fate and twisted. The horror began slowly. It started with the princess, the king's beloved daughter. She was beautiful and kind, just like the innocent girl who had been murdered. One morning, the princess woke up screaming. Shadows seemed to move around her room. Then, the accident started. A servant bringing her food tripped and broke his neck. A bird flew into her window and died instantly. Whispers began to snake through the palace servants, then out into the streets. "She is cursed," they said. "The princess brings death." The queen fell ill the next day, a mysterious fever that blackened her veins. Within hours, she was dead. The king's favorite maid died next. Then, the king himself began to cough blood. The irony was cruel and perfect. The people of the kingdom, terrified by the strange events, began to gather at the palace gates. They shouted the exact same words they had shouted at the innocent orphan girl. "Witch! Burn the witch! The princess is a witch!" The king lay in his bed, his body wasting away, listening to the chants of his own people demanding his daughter's death. He finally understood. The tears that ran down his face were not for himself, but for the realization of the monster he had been. He felt the cold terror of a father who cannot save his child, the exact terror he had ignored when he signed the orphan's death warrant. "Bring him," the king rasped. "Bring Azhakar." Azhakar entered the royal chambers. The air smelled of sickness and death. The king, pale and skeletal, tried to kneel, but he was too weak. "I am sorry," the king wept, his voice broken. "I see it now. I see the cruelty. Please take me, but spare her. She is innocent, just like the other child was innocent." It was a true confession. Azhakar looked at the broken king, then at the terrified princess huddled in the corner. The ancestors' warning echoed in his mind: restoration, not destruction. "The lesson is learned," Azhakar said. He waved his hand. A warm wind swept through the room. The shadows vanished. The color returned to the king's face. The sickness evaporated from the air. Outside, the angry crowd suddenly fell silent, their rage replaced by a sudden calm. The king stood up, healthy and whole, but humbled forever. The next morning, the decree was signed. The law was changed. The persecution of children ended in Shuruka forever. But the fear of Azhakar remained. He had shown them that he could kill with a sword, yes, but he could also reach into a man's life and dismantle it piece by piece. He was the man who had twisted fate itself. And as he walked the streets, even the shadows stepped aside to let him pass.
Centuries turned to dust. Kingdoms rose and fell. The stone towers of Shuruka eventually crumbled, reclaimed by the jungle and the shifting sands of time. The name of King Omari was forgotten. The name of the innocent girl was lost to the wind. But one name refused to die. Long before the modern world knew of superheroes, before comic books were inked or movies were filmed, the ancestors of Africa whispered a darker, older story around their fires. They spoke of a man who died for justice and returned with the power of the seven gods. They spoke of a protector who did not wear a cape, but wielded the lightning of judgment. Azhakar. He was not a hero born of sunlight and mercy. He was a force shaped by the cruelty of men. He did not rule to be loved. He ruled to ensure that the weak were never again crushed by the strong. His justice was swift. His rage was a storm. His balance was absolute. As generations passed, the story of Azhakar traveled. It moved from the deep forests of Africa, across the scorching deserts, and over the vast oceans. It was whispered by travelers, translated by scholars, and adapted by storytellers in distant lands. The details blurred, and Shuruka became Kondak. The seven African gods became Egyptian deities. The man named Azhakar was renamed by history, given a moniker that the modern world would come to fear and respect. They called him Black Adam. But those who know the true history know that the legend did not begin in a comic book. It began in a forgotten kingdom, with a man who refused to let an innocent child's death go unanswered. He was the original Storm, the first anti-hero. This is the untold African origin. This is the truth behind the myth. This is the story of Azhakar, the real Black Adam.